Today we're going to be studying from Acts chapter 12. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Now, this is the Apostle James, and it's the brother of John. There are two James that are apostles, but this is not James the Less. This is James, the brother of John. So we know that he was the first martyr for the apostles, but we also know that in chapter 7, the first martyr in the church had been Stephen. He had been one of the deacons that had been chosen to make sure that the Grecian widows weren't being overlooked with the daily distribution of the food. So the persecution's pretty great at this time, and it was Herod himself that was arresting some of these people. Paul is not anybody that's out there on the rampage anymore, going out and arresting the Christians, but it sounds like Herod is still, finding a way to make sure that some of these Christians are being arrested and put to death. Okay, verse 3. When Herod saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. Okay, so this festival of unleavened bread and Passover, they're a combined feast. They will sometimes call it the festival of Passover, sometimes the festival of unleavened bread, but basically they're all incorporated into the same feast. It goes on for 7 days. It's the 14th day, the beginning of the festival, that is actually when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. So after this festival is going to be over, they're going to bring Peter out for the public trial, hoping that they'll put him to death as well. That's what Herod's hoping. Okay, verse 5. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. So he's very well guarded. He's got 1 soldier on one side of him, another soldier on the other side of him. He's bound with chains, and there's other soldiers that are standing outside by the entrance that are guarding his prison. So Herod wants to make sure that there's no way that Peter can get away. But with God, we know that all things are possible. Verse 7. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals," and Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. This is confusing to Peter because he knows that he has seen a vision once before. He's the one that saw the animals that were being brought down in the blanket that was unclean animals where God told him to eat, and that was his way of trying to help Peter understand that the kingdom was going to be open to the Gentiles as well. So as this is happening to him, he's thinking he's seeing a vision instead of it actually happening. Okay, verse 10. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." Okay, so this is something where obviously God can send an angel to do any kind of miracle to rescue us. And angels, we're told in the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, that angels are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit eternal life. They can rescue us from situations like this. We know that in the past, there's been stories when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put into the fiery furnace when it was Nebuchadnezzar. When Nebuchadnezzar looked, he saw that there were 4 men in there, and he said, "Who is this other person?" Well, it was an angel that had gone to protect them. So when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of this fiery furnace. They had no smell of smoke on them. There was no singeing of any of their clothes, their hair, nothing. They were perfectly fine, while the guards that had thrown them into the furnace had died from how much heat there was, because Nebuchadnezzar had gotten so angry at the three men that he had turned the furnace up 7 times hotter, so the people who put them in there actually died, but yet these three men came out without any harm. And we know when we have an angel's protection, it doesn't make sense to us as human beings, but we know that angels can do supernatural things to keep us safe. That's what this angel did for Peter here. He allowed him to be able to have the shackles come off. He allowed him to be able to walk past all the guards without being seen. And he had the gate that just opened all by itself. I mean, it's just pretty amazing, all the things that God can do through these angels. And to think that one day when we've got our new glorified bodies, that we're going to be like the angels. That's what it says. We'll have a body like the angels. And it's just kind of neat to think, what the future could look like, even as we're on this earth for 1,000 years, reigning and ruling over the people that were left on the earth that had not been faithful yet, that they had to go through their test. Okay, verse 12. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Okay, so we know that Mary is the mother of John Mark. That's his name. Sometimes he's called John, sometimes he's called Mark, sometimes he's called John Mark. So this particular man is going to eventually go travel with Paul. He's going to go on the missionary journey with Paul, and his cousin's name is Barnabas. When Paul and John Mark are in a disagreement, eventually he's going to have to separate, and Paul was going to travel with Silas, and John Mark is going to go with his cousin Barnabas. So this is the connections, that John Mark is a cousin of Barnabas, and his mother is Mary. Okay, so he knows that they're gathered there, they're praying, and so Peter, in verse 13, knocks on the door. Verse 13. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." So she's so excited she doesn't even open the door to let him in. She's running back to the people that are praying and saying, "Hey, Peter's outside." And this is how they respond in verse 15. "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." Now that's a pretty kind of like interesting statement. I've thought about that before. It must be his angel. Could it be that people do have different angels that can sound like them? Like if you have an angel that guards over you, can he take on your voice? Well, I mean, obviously nothing's impossible for an angel, but that was her explanation, or their explanation, after Rhoda told them that Peter was out there. They thought, oh no, it can't be Peter because he's in jail. It's got to be his angel. Okay, verse 16. But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this," he said, and then he left for another place. Now, the James that he's talking about could be James, the brother of Jesus, because he was a pretty high up leader in the church around this time. But there also is another apostle named James the Less. So it's hard to know which James that he's wanting him to tell. It could be the apostle James, but again, we're not sure. Verse 18. In the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. And this is what would happen a lot of times. If a guard did not do his job and the person got away, it was their life for the life that was lost. So these guards are being put to death, and they did a good job. It was just you can't you can't beat an angel, so to speak. So you've got no chance when it comes to going against an angel. So these people were put to death because they had not kept their prisoner in prison. Okay, we're going to go on with verse 19, finish it up. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon. They now joined together and sought an audience with him. After securing the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. Okay, so what we got going on here is that there's other towns that are arguing with Herod, and or there's a argument, and they are wanting there to be a certain amount of food that they get. There's not any kind of food that they're getting. It seems like they're not at peace with each other, so they're asking for Herod to get involved in this quarrel that's going on. So Herod is going to gather the people, and he's going to listen to what's going on, but we're going to see what happens as people are gathering and honoring him, how God handles the situation. Okay, verse 21. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a god, not of a man." Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of God continued to spread and to flourish. When Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission, they returned from Jerusalem, taking with them John, also called Mark. So we're going to see here, this is where Barnabas, Saul, and John Mark are all traveling together. And again, remember, Barnabas and John Mark are cousins. Something's going to happen, though, where there's going to be a disagreement between John Mark and Paul, so Barnabas is eventually going to go off on his own with him. Okay, but let's go back to what happened to Herod. He was doing this public address to get the people to figure out how there could be peace between him and the people that needed the food. And when he has all the people gathered together, before he could even make this ruling, they're all praising him. And in this praising, they're calling him a god. And instead of Herod saying, "Oh no, I'm not a god, I'm not the god of the Jews, I'm just a king," he did not rightly discipline the people. He accepted that praise. He should have said, "No, I'm not, and don't worship me, only worship God," just like Peter did when Cornelius was falling down and almost like worshiping him. He said, "No, no, no, I'm just a man, don't worship me." And he didn't do that. And because of that, an angel struck him right then and there. Now, I've got some places in history where I've read where he didn't immediately die. It was almost like he had a heart attack that day. But as he was taken away a few days later, he died, and there were worms that had eaten him up. That sounds so disgusting. But that's how God chose to put him to death. Some people think it was immediate, like what it's saying here, but according to some historical documents, it was several days after the being struck down and before he was eaten by the worms. So again, we're not sure. But now we're going to see how eventually John Mark, Barnabas, and Saul are going to be starting a lot of their missionary journeys. There's going to be a lot of travel that's going to be going on in these next few chapters, and really almost to the very end, because Paul is just so busy going from one place to the other. If he's started a church, he'll go back and visit them several times. And so this will be a lot of talking about different countries that they're going to be going to, but you'll see that the church is just growing like crazy through the efforts of obviously Paul and Barnabas and John Mark as they're going around, but there's other apostles that Peter's in the area of Jerusalem, and he's doing a lot of discipling there and growing the church there. So, and they've been scattered all over to different areas because of that persecution that happened in Acts chapter 7 with Stephen. So the church is growing with all the different people. Philip is going and doing a certain amount. We've got all these different men that, even if they weren't an apostle, they went out and their job, they felt that burden to go and preach the good news everywhere. And so wherever they went, no matter what city they went to, they would be preaching the gospel everywhere. So the church was growing like crazy at this time. And persecution really, when you look at back at history, persecution has been good for the church because it usually is a time where there's people more serious about their faith. When people go through difficult times, they tend to want to turn to God, and then people see the bravery of, these people that are being persecuted, and it's causing them to want to be a part of it. So it's just really actually better for the church, I think, when we go through persecution than when we get so comfortable and we get lazy. And God's not happy with that he wants us to be producing fruit. And many times when we're just too comfortable, we get caught up in the cares of the world, and then many people are falling away. So this, you'll see, Paul goes through a lot of persecution, but the church continues to grow and grow.